Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Rockledge Ranch this morning. This is our ranch manager, Mr. Andy Morris, and I'm going to let him take it away from here. He's going to tell you all about our horses here at Rockledge.
Good morning, everybody. The voice you just heard is that of Melissa Cowan. She is our lead interpreter here at Rockledge Ranch Historic Site. We're located in Colorado Springs, Colorado, within the actual footprint of Garden of the Gods. And I know millions of people come through the Garden of the Gods every year, and thousands come through Rockledge Ranch, and we are a living history site. We are not dressed as interpreters today. There's this little thing going on called a pandemic, and so today we're just dressed in normal clothes, but I'm excited to share with you some of what we do here at Rockledge Ranch, and today we're going to concentrate on our horse program. So behind me, we have a team of Shire draft horses that I want to hook up, and we're all going to go on a virtual ride. So I'm excited about having you come along. I've never given a ride with maybe thousands of people before, but this will be a first for me. So thanks for tuning in. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine who is a horse ranger in the Garden of the Gods, and her name is Stephanie Stover. And I feel that I know a lot about horses, but she knows a lot more. So whenever I have a question that I don't know the answer to, I defer to Stephanie Stover. So let's come over here and we'll meet her.
Well, thank you, Mr. Morris.
Now, Stephanie's there on the right, in case you weren't sure who she was. But here she is, and she is standing here with one of our horses. This is not a draft horse that she's with, and he's about to fall asleep. You can see he's pretty worked up. This horse actually is a wild Mustang. He was captured in Nevada, I think about 18 years ago, and he went through a program down in Canyon City, Colorado, where the prisoners trained him. If you have an opportunity, you might look into that further. It's really interesting. Some of the horses don't turn out. I mean, they're a wild animal after all when they're caught, and but others turn out really well. We've got this horse because here at Rockledge Ranch, we interpret the lives of the people in the Pikes Peak region. We are actually at the foot of Pikes Peak. Later, when we go on our wagon ride, I will show you Pikes Peak from the ranch. Right here, we're up against the foothills, so you can't see Pikes Peak right now. But Melissa's going to work with the camera and use her skills, and we'll go for a ride, and we'll be seeing Pikes Peak. But here in this region, historically, of course, there were a lot of American Indian tribes that passed through this area. The most prominent tribe was the Ute tribe. And so when we interpret our American Indian history here at Rockledge Ranch, we primarily do it through the eyes of the Ute people. And a horse like this would have been one that they would have had after the Spanish brought horses in the 1500s. So Kaba is his name, and that is actually the Ute word for horse. So if you'd like to get to know him a little better, I think you might enjoy getting to know him. When he came here, he was full of a lot of spunk, because he still kind of had that attitude that he needed to be tough. And even though he weighs maybe half what our draft horses weigh, he had them buffaloed. He would push them around. He'd even turn around and kick them sometimes. And when they were at their feed mangers, he would move them out of the way. And I often thought, I wish those big horses would just push him over and get him out of the way, but he had them intimidated. And I think he kind of got a kick out of that. That's kind of his personality. So if you'd like, let's talk about him for a moment. First of all, about wild horses in America. I think the latest count was there are over 50,000 wild horses that roam the West. And so for some people, they're a real symbol of the West. For other people, for ranchers and others, they don't think so highly about these animals because they compete with livestock for grazing in some of the areas where there's not a lot to eat or to drink. So in this country, a lot of them are rounded up and put in pens, and they're just there fed and watered, and people don't adopt as many as they capture. So they have the BLM has a challenge on their hands, but we're glad that we brought him here, and he's turned out really well. He was trained by the prisoners, as I mentioned, that when we got him, we could ride him. And of course, we wanted to be able to ride him bareback to depict that at our American Indian site. But he also allows us to put a saddle on him, and then I trained him to pull a wagon, which when you think about a wild animal, you put a harness on them, which I will put on one of our draft horses here in a moment so you can see what that means. But when you put a harness on an animal, you're putting it on his back. You're also putting blinders on so he can't see around. And then when you hook him up to a vehicle, it's actually moving when he moves. So every part of that should scare the tar out of a horse. And so he allows us to do that. And we took our time and trained him. And he's the kind of horse that when he has a job to do, he really enjoys having a challenge. It's when he doesn't have a job to do, he gets in trouble. Some people say I have that same quality. I don't know if that's true or not. As you can see, he and I are buddies. I never hand feed these horses. I don't want them to come to me because I have a treat. I want them to be around me because I think maybe they respect me and enjoy being around me, and we do things together and we have good experiences. So these horses are calm and enjoy being around us. And you can see, I think he must like me, and I'm kind of proud of that. So let me talk about this horse for a moment, and then we're going to talk about the draft horses. This horse is really, I mean, he's my buddy. And I think what I'll do, I'll talk about his teeth. Why would I talk about his teeth? Well, you can tell a horse's age within a year or two if you look at their teeth and also the rest of the horse. And that's important when you're buying a horse. There's an expression, never look a gift horse in the mouth. What that means, if I were to give this horse to my friend Stephanie, he's kind of old. He's not a young horse. She wouldn't want to look at his teeth to see if I gave her an old horse. She would want to say, well, thank you. That's nice of you to give me a horse. And you don't want to look at his teeth and say, well, wait, he gave me an old decrepit horse that I got to spend vet money on, and I got to feed him special rations. So anyway, with this horse's teeth, I'll show you his teeth, and look at that. You probably think that guy needs to go see an equine dentist. He's like a camel face. Anyway, so what you're seeing there is he's kind of long in the tooth. That's another expression people use, and that comes from a horse that when they're first born, their teeth erupt at a certain time, so you can look and see when it's a young horse. Their teeth come in at 8 days, 8 weeks, and 8 months. Then they grow down, and then the adult teeth erupt through the gums at 2.5 years, 3.5 years, 4.5 years. Then when they have all their adult teeth, they start to wear their teeth down because they have cups on them. And when they get smooth, you can look at that and tell. And then also as they grow older, the teeth start to pronate. So what you see on him illustrates that. So Stephanie, how old do you think that horse is?
I'd say he's probably 19, maybe 20.
19 or 20. So he's considered an older horse, but today with good vet care and food and upkeep, these horses can live into their 30s, which is not uncommon. That would still be considered an older horse, but back in 1870s, that'd probably almost be unheard of. So obviously he's barefoot. Wild horses didn't have shoes. And he's got feet like hard as an anvil because he's maybe 100 generations of horses that survived because they had good feet. And it starts with that. And let me show you his foot. For a comparison in a moment, I'm going to show you one of our draft horses' feet. And this, when the farrier comes to work on his feet, he barely has to use his rasp on Kava's feet. They're just so nice to take care of and so hard. And they're just really nice shape to them. So, any questions about Kava or Stephanie? Okay, well, come along with me.
God, you didn't mouth me.
And I want to show you this horse. This is one of our English Shire horses. And I think she's really regal. Her name is Victoria, and she is just an outstanding mare. She's an outstanding draft horse. She happens to be a mare. When a baby is born, you call it a foal. Like if you're driving down the road and you look out this time of year here in Colorado, you'll see horses with babies in a field, and you might say, look at those foals. You wouldn't necessarily say, look at that colt, look at that filly, because you may not be able to tell what it is, what gender it is. You call it a foal. When they're a female, when they're young, they're called a filly. The male, when they're young, is called a colt. Then most horse people think that when they're 3 or 4 years old, the filly becomes a mare and the colt becomes a stallion. We have this mare, Victoria, and on the other side, her teammate is called Winston, and he's a gelding. Sometimes when people have a dog and they have it neutered, when you have a horse farm people don't tend to use euphemisms like that. You castrate that horse and it becomes a gelding. Some people call that brain surgery, because when you do that, then that boy horse doesn't pay attention so much to the lady horses, and he concentrates more on his job.
I've got a couple questions for you that have come in, Mr. Morris.
Yes, ma'am.
First question was about, does it hurt for the horses to get their shoes put on?
That's a fantastic question. I'm going to show, now I won't drive a nail in the horse's foot with the shoe, but I'm going to show that. So a moment ago, you saw the little hoof on that Mustang. I'm going to show you this larger foot on this horse. And the reason, quite obviously, she has a bigger foot. She's a bigger horse. If she had that little foot like Kava and she was walking through a wet field, pulling a plow or any kind of farm implement, she'd post hole in that field if she had little feet. So she got great big feet. Let me prove it to you. We'll show you right now. Stephanie, would you mind holding on to this for a moment?
Another question that's come in that you can answer as we stand next to her is, how tall is she? How many hands high is she?
Well, that's a good question. A hand, for whatever reason, is considered, they used to use their hand, and that space was, I guess, on average 4 inches. So she's 17.1, so 17 times 4 plus 1 inch. When they go beyond 4 inches, kind of like with the person, you wouldn't say he's 5'13", you'd say he's 6'1". So she's 17.1 thereabouts. If she was a few inches taller, then she'd be considered 18 hands. If she's 17.2 now, 2 more inches, she'd be 18 hands. So she's not considered a great big horse for a Shire, but a good average size horse. Let me show you her feet. And by the way, she weighs probably about, Stephanie, what do you think? 1,850 pounds? About 1,850. She's not quite a ton. Sometimes people brag about how much their draft horses weigh, and I never understand that. As long as they're in good shape. This horse is in good shape. You can't see her ribs, but I can feel them. So we take good care of these horses here at Rockledge. These horses, by the way, originally came from England. Some people talk about Clydesdales. They were originated not too far away. They were originally from Scotland. Then your Percheron, the all-black horse, is from France. And then the Belgian is from Belgium. Anyway, let's take a look at his feet. Give me your foot. Look at the size difference of that foot from what you just saw with Kava. Now, somebody asked about, does it hurt when you put shoes on? Stephanie, would you mind showing me that shoe? This shoe is not the right size for this horse's foot. Her foot's even bigger than this horseshoe. But do you see this rim of material on the outside there? Look at my thumb. Do you see the rim on my thumb? This material is exactly like my fingernail. That when I trim my fingernail, it doesn't hurt. You can trim a baby's fingernail and they don't squalor. But if you quick them, if you cut it too close to the quick, that baby's gonna cry. It's the same way with this horse. When the horseshoer comes in, or the farrier, he's called, he comes through and he'll clean out that hoof. And then, unlike that shoe I was just showing you, he'd make sure that shoe fit perfectly that shape. Then, believe it or not, he'd put that shoe on there, and then he'd take these nails. And if the person's skilled, now again, this bar should come out there, but I didn't have any horseshoes because we keep these shoes barefoot. He would take that nail, and again, it would go right through that part of the foot, drive it in, and old Victoria wouldn't care a bit because she doesn't feel it. By the way, do you see this part of the foot? That's called the frog. I don't know why, but it is. Horse people tend to say that a horse has 5 hearts, the one in her chest and the one in each foot makes 5. Because when a horse moves, and a horse is almost always constantly moving, this soft frog pushes the blood flow back up her leg. So that's probably part of the reason why they still haven't figured out a way to save a horse that breaks a leg. Strange as that sounds, people break a leg, it's good we don't die. We just heal up and go on. Other animals heal up and go on. If a cow has a broken leg, they'll stand around 3-legged and they'll heal while they're just standing around over time. If a horse breaks their legs, bad news. And I think a big part of that is they have to walk, they have to move, they have to get circulation. So if you'd like, at this time, I think I will start to harness Victoria. Winston on the other side has his harness on already, except for his bridle. We can talk about that. So I'm gonna go into the barn after I put the collar on. Almost forgot.
Nice hook pick. Nice hook pick that somebody hand forged.
Oh, thank you. We were thinking about maybe doing a blacksmith program in the future. So if you're enjoying this, stay tuned. Okay, so we're gonna put the collar on this horse. The invention of a collar made a huge difference in getting more horsepower out of these animals, because in essence, what they do is they push against the collar when they're pulling. Before the collar came along, at best, they had a strap that went across here and went back to the implement they were pulling. And if that was put on this animal wrong, it would choke her. I've seen pictures that were pretty dreadful, old-timey photos where they had a strap that went across her neck back and it was just choking that horse. And yet, you know, she's expected to work. So the invention of this collar allows this horse to get a lot more work, and it's very comfortable. So they're pushing against the collar in essence. So I will get the harness. Melissa, do you want to follow me in, or do you want to?
Sure, I'll follow you. It may not, it's a little dark inside the barn, so.
Yeah, and this is our barn here at Rockledge Ranch. And I imagine you can't see me now.
Actually, the light's good. I'm surprised.
Okay, well, this harness, it's not exactly light. I'm guessing it weighs 40 pounds, maybe more, I don't know. Maybe I just make it look easy. So what I'm gonna do is, I'll just go ahead and harness and I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing here. I'm putting the hames in the collar, in front of the collar. Let's stand still here. You know, I've often said, I'm glad that we don't try to farm with buffaloes or animals that could, that don't have really any desire to get along, because I weigh 180 pounds, she weighs 10 times what I weigh, and if she didn't want me to put a harness on her or be around her, there'd be no way I'd be able to. People oftentimes say, never walk behind a horse. What am I doing? Am I surprising her? Am I being loud? Am I making a lot of fast motions? Horses don't like those things, nor do I. So people that are around horses learn to always let the horse know what you're doing so you don't surprise them. Because you think an animal this big, probably very little that could scare her. Well, if a paper bag blew across here, she could really kind of get galvanized, pull back, and maybe try to break a rope. So you're always kind of watching, but doing what you can to keep an animal calm and have a routine so they know what you're doing. So when I harness this horse, I always start at the front. Okay. Got the hames on. Now I'm going to do the pole strap. Nope, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Got to reach across here, snap the other hame ring, and then go through the pole strap. By the way, do you see the hair on her feet? I didn't mention that. Believe it or not, this is called feathers. Those are called feathers. I don't know why, but they are. Can you think of another draft horse breed that has feathers? Probably the most popular breed in America. You're right, Clydesdale. Farmers don't like that. I know Amish folks that have Clydesdales or Shires. First thing they do is trim all that off, because all that does is catch mud and other debris. It looks fantastic when you have a show horse. When an 8-horse hitch comes in, that Budweiser Clydesdale hitch or a hitch of Shires, they come in picking their feet up, their feathers are flying. The folks will make sure those really creamy white and clean and beautiful. That's wonderful in a show arena, but it's not so great in a farm or ranch. But I'll leave them on these guys. You might wonder what this is. You don't see that much, and I don't know why here in modern times. We have a lot of old-timey photographs that show this, and it's a net. Have any idea what that net's for? Yeah, Johnny, you in the back. This is a fly net. Yep. So what that does is when a horse walks, naturally this moves with him. It's much more effective to my mind than fly spray, because a black horse like this in the summer gets hot, you fly spray him and it seems to dry right off after a little bit. This is always on him. It's much better than, say, a canvas over the top, because of course that would make a horse hot. This allows him to stay cool. Easy there. Okay. Stephanie, is there anything I forgot to do here?
Always good to double check.
Always good to check with others that are watching. So, are we able to drive these horses right now? How would I steer them? I got no way to steer them. So you're right. We need to put those straps that go to their bit, and the bit fits in their mouth. And those straps are called lines. Don't call them reins. They're reins when you're riding a horse, and they're reins when you're driving a pleasure vehicle. But farmers and ranchers call them lines. So we need to put the halter, or the bridle rather. This is a halter. The bridle has blinders. We're going to put those on. I'm going to have Stephanie put the bridle on this horse. I'm going to go over to Winston, and we'll put the bridles on, and then we'll put the lines on, and then we're going to go for a ride. So Stephanie, if you could do, her bridle is right there.
She's kind of tall for a short person. So she kind of helps me out. We have an arrangement here because I'm not very tall and she is. So she can lower her head down for me a little bit so that I can get that on there without affecting it. And then I give her a little rub as a reward for lowering her head down for me, which keeps her trying for me. There's all kinds of different attachment points that makes these bridles and bits work right. This is called a curb chain. And it's not really engaging on this bit because Victoria is so nice and sensitive, we don't need to add any leverage to that bit, which is what would happen if we attach the reins further down. We'd have a little leverage. We're going to attach the lines, that is, right here.
I got a question that came in asking about how much these horses weigh.
Well, they weigh about a little over 1,800 pounds each, so not quite a ton. A ton is 2,000 pounds. They're right probably about 1,850 pounds. I keep them in pretty good shape. I'm not trying to make them as fat as I can so I can brag about how much they weigh. So as you can see, it takes a little bit of time to put a harness on a horse. It's faster to put a saddle on a horse, but usually it doesn't take but a few minutes. I don't know if you can see that, but I just put the bit in Winston's mouth. They say a horse's mouth is just as sensitive as ours, so you keep that in mind. You don't want to bang the bit in there, and you sure don't want to jerk around the horse. And when I'm driving him, I'll make sure that I try to be gentle when I turn him or stop him. I'm going to talk about what these are for. These are the lines that we were talking about. And I have a question for you. That I'm going to be driving two horses, but how many lines am I going to have in my hand? Melissa, can you hear me?
Well, I'm coming around so we can hear you better. And I also have to ask you to repeat a question.
Okay.
I misread it as it was scrolling across the screen. They were actually asking how much weight can they pull, not how much do they weigh.
Okay, I've seen sometimes at fairs you have draft horse pulls, and they'll, the teamsters, the person that drives a team of horses is called a teamster. That I've seen teamsters with a large team of horses, a little bigger than these guys, pull 15,000 pounds on a sled. Now, a sled doesn't have wheels. That's something that drags. So that 15,000 pounds is a whole lot heavier because they're having to drag it. Now, they're not pulling it a half a mile. They're pulling it maybe 40 feet or so. But it's really amazing to see. On a wagon, I've never had a horse get balky and not pull. That's the term when a horse won't pull. These horses don't know how to pull just because they're big. So you have to train them. When you look at this hind end on this horse and my little arm, this is all muscle. When they're pulling, that's what they use. Their front feet, when they're really pulling, just keeps them from falling on their faces. If you see a horse pulling a stump or something, they're down low on the ground and their back legs are driving. So they're built to be able to pull, but they don't know how. If you do it wrong, they couldn't pull the hat off your head. If you do it right, they think they can pull that barn off the foundation. So without going into huge detail, you start out very light, letting them get used to feeling something pulling against their collar and pulling against it and working against it. You add more to it. I start with a big tractor tire after I have somebody just walking behind pulling on the tugs so they get used to it. Then a big tractor tire does two things. It makes some noise. It's heavy enough that it makes them work. And then if you have a wreck, nobody gets hurt because rubber tires not going to hurt, hopefully not hurt anybody. But if you go from there sequentially and do it where they build confidence, they trust you, they trust they can pull just about anything within reason. And like I say, I've never had a wagon that was too loaded for them to pull. So great question. Okay, Steph, you got the lines on that horse? Okay, I asked you a moment ago that when you're riding a horse, you got two reins. You got one in each hand. That's one horse. If you're driving a cart or a small wagon that has shafts, you're driving one horse and you got two lines. I've got two horses, and yet I'm only going to have two lines. Why is that? Well, the reason is these lines, in a moment I'll show you, they're on the outside of the horses, and I'm holding those lines. Those lines go to their outside bit. So if I were to pull on both of them, they're going to go like that. Somebody came up with an ingenious design, very simple, is that this line splits. So on this left horse, I've got this line, but since it forks and goes over to the other horse, right now this talks to them on the left side of the horse, on the bit. When I get the right line, when I pull that, it pulls on the right side. Pretty simple, right? Well, that way I don't have all these lines. If you see somebody driving an 8-horse hitch, how many lines would they have in their hands? So you got 4 sets of 2 horses, 8 horses total. Are they holding 8 lines in each hand? Not sure that's possible. He's holding 4 because the same thing. Every team will have the lines like this so that he's holding the line, one line for each team of horses. Okay, did we double check? We got throat latches, curb chains, bits. And what?
All lines set.
Okay.
Are you unplaying yet?
Not yet. Bear with us, folks. We're about ready to go for a ride. Step. One thing that you learn when you're around animals is that they pick up on your emotions, just like a kid or a dog can do it. We sometimes forget how easy it is for animals to do that. So whenever I'm around the horses, I always want to convey a feeling of calm, but respect, both coming from me and to me. So like there a moment ago, I asked Winston to step over. I didn't pull at him. I didn't hit him. I didn't threaten him. I didn't go around and knee him in the ribs to get him to go over. He knew what I wanted and he did it. If he didn't do it, then I probably would have come around and pushed him over so he'd know I meant it. Sometimes horses will be like, I don't feel much like doing that today. Then you have to make sure they do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is tie these lines together, which is something I always do, because if you're driving a wagon and you drop a line, guess what? You're in big trouble, because now you're going to be able to stop them, and you're only going to be able to turn them in the one side, and not a situation you want to be in. So this way, if I'm holding them and I drop a line, I can quickly gather it back up. This right here is just an add-on that I do for safety. This is called a britchin tie. This back part of the harness is called the britchin. This is where the brakes are. We'll talk about that when we go for a ride. This keeps them from becoming bookends when I'm driving them over to the wagon. If you don't have that, they can kind of split up, and sometimes I've seen people actually have the horses turn and come back at them. That's not good. Okay, so Steph, we're good?
I don't believe you have just Winston untied.
You have Winston untied?
I do not.
Okay, why don't you untie him?
I got Victoria untied.
Oh, sorry, I got the wrong horse. I'm here by Winston. Now you notice they're untied, but they're not going anywhere. They won't go anywhere until I ask them to. What do you suppose I ought to do? You see in all the Westerns where the guy, he shakes the lines or the reins and whaps the horse and gets them going. You think that's a good idea? What happens if they're used to that, to making them go, and we're on the wagon and they're walking and those lines are slapping them, then they go into a trot, now it's slapping them more. They think you want them to run, now you have a runaway. It's not a good idea. Try to avoid that. So what I'm going to do, a lot of people think clucking at a horse will get them to go, and sometimes people come through our ranch and I may have the horses hooked up and I think they're trying to give me the business, and they'll cluck at the horses. Go ahead, cluck at them. It doesn't mean anything to them. Everything we're talking about right now, all the sounds of my voice right now, means nothing to them. Maybe Melissa could show Victoria's ears. She's got her ear back here because she thinks in a moment I might give a command, and I'm going to. So listen to what I do. I kiss at them. That's, for these horses, that's the command to go. Now, Steph, if you want to go unlock the gate, folks, we're just about ready to go for a ride. Beautiful day here in Rockledge Ranch, and again, we're in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Because of this dang pandemic, we're not open doing programs right now. But once we are back up and running, which I hope to be very soon, we'd love to have you come visit us. To learn more about what we are, where we're at, all kinds of programs that we do, we have a website. And it's called rockledgeranch.com, and we'll mention that again later. You see how when I turn on the right, I'm pulling back gently on the right line? Look at what he's doing. He's turning. Now watch me pull on the left line. You see how they turn? Am I jerking on them? Am I being mean? Am I yelling at them? These animals are considered gentle giants. You'll hear that a lot with draft horses. They call them gentle giants. And that's true. They're called cold-blooded horses because of their calm attitude, and they came from the colder regions. Your Arabs and thoroughbreds are considered more hot-blooded because of their attitude. They're full of energy and they want to go. And they came from the warmer regions originally. Okay, I'm going to go around the wagon, Melissa, and then we'll hook them up. We have lots of different animals here at Rockledge. We have horses, chickens, cows. We will get pigs. We have sheep. And this right here is our manure pile. That's like a pile of money to a farmer, because that's where you get your fertilizer from all your animals. Whoa. Back. Whoa. Okay, folks, if ever you have a team of horses and you're hooking them up, this is the most important thing. Always hook the front first. Remember that, front first. The reason being is when you hook them to the tongue here, this is called the yoke. Now they're attached, and you could stop them if you had to. If for some reason, I hate to even bring it up, but if you were to hook the back first and not the front, they could take off and run. There's nothing to keep the wagon from running into them, which means they're probably going to jump again. If you do stop them, there's no way to steer them, and you're in major trouble. So you always do the front first. Now I'm going to hook up the tugs. And you notice I'm making sure the horse knows I'm here. What do I drop? 3? And I do the inside first so I can get out of the way in case the horses get spooked by something. Step over. Even though these guys are so nice, in a way, sometimes a real gentle team is more dangerous, because I've seen people not pay attention and think, oh, these horses are always so well behaved, nothing will ever bother them, and you get lazy and you get hurt. Sometimes it's better to be around horses that are a little jumpy to remind you of what can happen. So we got Victoria hooked up. I'll come around and I'll hook up Winston. By the way, I didn't even mention, Melissa, maybe you can show those leather patches over their eyes.
Sure.
What the heck are those for? What the heck are those patches for? Is that being mean? What that is, it's called a blinder. I guess in simple terms, a horse being a prey or a food animal, they need to be able to see all the way around, protect themselves, be able to see as they've evolved. So they can leave their head in one spot and virtually see 360 degrees around, with the exception of a blind spot right in front and then right behind them. Horses think a lot. This keeps them from seeing so much, makes it so they don't have to worry about everything around them. All I want them to do and be concentrating on is what they see in front of them, wherever they turn their head. So if I had a snake right here shaking it around, it wouldn't scare them, you wouldn't see it. That's the idea behind a blinder. It calms the horse down because it eliminates all the things that are going on around a team. It makes it so they don't get as scared because they don't see it. Okay, Melissa, why don't you go on around, hop up. I'll jump up. Oh. They're a little antsy because it's springtime here at Rock Ledge Ranch. Who can blame them? I'm going to make him stand for a moment because I don't want him to think he can decide when we're going to go. I can't blame him, but I don't want him to start. Whoa. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to have Melissa Cowan, the lady behind the camera, talk to you about Rock Ledge Ranch. I'll go ahead and drive, and because the wind's blowing a little bit, you might not be able to hear me as well. But keep the questions coming in. We're going to go for a ride now. I'm going to have a seat, and we'll have some fun. Thanks for being here today.
Well, again, thank you everybody for being here. I hope you've enjoyed our learning a little bit about our horses and that process. It's a pretty long process. I think I was surprised the first time I watched them hitch up the horses, and of course they don't talk the whole time, so it goes a little bit quicker. But we're going to take this ride around Rockledge Ranch. Rockledge Ranch is a park that was, I'm going to turn this way. We got to get this great view of Pikes Peak and the barn. We'll go back here. Everybody's saying they can hear you too, Andy. So if I ask you a question, go ahead and answer because they can hear you well.
Did you show the folks pumpkin?
I didn't show them pumpkin. You can see Pumpkin out there.
Seem to have care at all.
Pumpkin is our Jersey cow. She's here. We know that the homesteader who came here filed his patent for the homestead here on the property that is Rockledge Ranch in 1801, but his tax records show us that he had a cow and a calf. So she's here during our summer program. She's out at the cabin to represent Mr. Galloway's cow. But Rockledge Ranch is a living history ranch. We bring history to life every day that we're open. During the summer, our program runs Wednesday through Sunday. You can come visit, see a beautiful house like this one. I know it's probably a little hard to hear over the wagon noise, but this house here is our orchard house. It was built in 1907 by General Palmer for his sister-in-law, Charlotte Slater, and her husband. And locally famous, Thomas McLaren was the architect for this particular house. Say hi, Stephanie, you're in the picture. When you come visit us at Rockledge, come out, have a picnic, enjoy a day out here. But you get to visit each of our historic sites. We have 6 areas, one of them being the Orchard House. That particular house is kind of like a mini version of Downton Abbey to kind of give you a sense of, you know, what that might be like. It would have had live-in servants. So when you visit there, you'll see the cook hard at work in the kitchen on the original coal stove that's still in the house. Walk up the servant stairs up to the servants' quarters on the 3rd floor. What's really exciting about that house is to see all the technology too that's in that house. General Palmer liked technology. He was the founder of Colorado Springs. He was a general from the Civil War and had come out here to build a railroad. And that's how Colorado Springs came to be. The building you can see out in front of me is our Blacksmith Shop. And Mr. Morris here not only is a great horseman, but he is also our blacksmith here at the ranch. So one of our future programs we're hoping to do is to have a blacksmith program where you can watch Mr. Morris working in the blacksmith shop. But at this moment, we're coming around the corner to this beautiful view of Garden of the Gods. Someone mentioned in the comments about coming out here for our powwow. That's something that we do in the month of September. And this field out here is filled with booths and then a dance and drum ring where you can come experience that part of our history. The house out in front of us is the Rockledge House. The Rockledge House was built in 1875 by the Chambers family. The Chambers had come out to Colorado. Mrs. Chambers was having some respiratory issues. We don't know for sure if that was TB or just something else. But at that time in history, people were coming out west to take part of what was called the Prairie Cure. the Prairie Cure was using the sunshine, the dry climate to help with those respiratory issues. And so the Chambers came out, bought the property from the original homesteader, Mr. Galloway, and proceeded over the next 25 years to have quite an economy going here at Rockledge Ranch. We know that they dairied here. They also had an orchard. And what's interesting about their orchard is that that's actually how the orchard house got its name originally, is because the orchard we have back behind Stephanie today has been replanted. But this green area out here, when the orchard house was built, would have been an orchard. So it got its name from that. But the Chambers, there's a little closer up of the Chambers Rockledge house. They also built this house to be a boarding house. So people would come and stay with them. They would serve a noonday meal that you could purchase. There was also a greenhouse behind the house there. That's something that here at Rockledge that we're working on right now, is we're in the fundraising stage of so that we can rebuild that greenhouse that would have stood behind the Rockledge house. You can see our sheep and our chickens down here in the yard. Coming back around to the barn. I'm sorry, folks, if I've missed a couple questions as we've gone along. As I'm recording, sometimes if I don't see them quick enough, I miss them. So if you've got another question, please post it again so I can try to catch that. As I've been talking, I'm not sure that I've caught all the questions. Out through the trees there, it may be a little bit difficult to see. You can see our recreated Galloway homestead. Mr. Galloway was the first European on this property. And that's one of the really exciting things about Rockledge Ranch, is the fact that we represent the lives of people who actually lived on this piece of property. Also during the summer, we also have a Native American area representing specifically the Ute people. We've got a Ute teepee that gets put up daily. So come out and visit us this summer and see all of the wonderful things that we have here at Rockledge Ranch. Mr. Morris, we did get a question about the width here. Could you?
Okay. Well, earlier I talked about how I don't hit these horses. I don't slap them with the lines. I don't want them to think that means anything. You look here what I'm doing. I can bump against them. It doesn't mean anything. If a horse, for instance, were to get scared of something that I needed him to go forward, and say even a puddle sometimes can make a horse think, I think they're thinking maybe it's a hole that goes forever. Whoa. You can't have a horse not do what you want him to do, and when they get to thinking on their own, you can have problems. And if a horse backs up when they're hooked up, they can jackknife this wagon and actually tip it over. And we don't always do virtual wagon rides. Sometimes I have a full wagon ride, and I don't want people to get dumped over. So if a horse were to back up, for instance, because something was making him frightened, I might tap him right here above his tail about that hard to let him know he needs to either stop or move forward, that backing up is not an option. So I very rarely ever use this. Sometimes I'll use it when one of those big old black horse flies is flying around, it lands on them. I can use this to get the fly off. And they seem to know what I'm doing in that case. But this is just in case I need to. And I don't use it where I slash him, hit him, and cause any kind of problem like that. It would just be like if I needed him to step over, but maybe not move forward, but step over, I I would pull on the left lines and just tap him a little bit there on the flank, for instance, and have him step over. So that's why this is here. And we always have that because I don't want them to think that slapping them with the lines means anything. And so this is just a way to, if I need it, to encourage them to do what I need to do, but it's never in a harsh way.
All right. Now that we've stopped, are there any other last questions before we leave our ride today? We appreciate everybody come in today. Please take a look at rockledgeranch.com. Like us on Facebook. That's a great place to learn about more of these programs that the ranch will be doing, as well as other parts of the cultural services program of the city of Colorado Springs. I know that on the 25th, we have a Children's History Hour that the Pioneers Museum downtown will be putting on virtually. So make sure that you like us so that you can learn about all of those other programs. I know this next week, I'm pretty sure that we're going to be doing one in Garden of the Gods. So thanks for coming today, everyone. And we will see you next time. Hopefully ours will be in the Blacksmith Shop.
Thank you. And on behalf of Melissa and Stephanie Stover and Victoria and Winston, it's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed this immensely, and we hope to see you out here at Rockledge Ranch in the future. Take care. And remember, always saddle your own horse.